All right, awesome. We're live. Took a little while. No, it's a little bit late. It's a half an hour late actually, but we are here. Welcome. This is the Raspberry Pi class for the Orland Park Public Library. Uh, get our screen up on here. All right, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry that it's been half an hour. We did run into some technical difficulties, but now we're fully ready to get started. This is the Raspberry Pi class from the Orland Park Public Library. My name is Matt. We're going to go over some basics and an overall, what a Raspberry Pi is, how to use them, where to get them, what they're used for, where you can find them. Pretty much just everything about a Raspberry Pi. Pretty excited for this one. This is a lot of people are very interested in it. A lot of people don't know what it is. I mean, if you mention to someone about a Raspberry Pi, obviously they're going to think you're talking about a food. They're not going to think you're talking about a computer, which is what it is. It's a computer. We have two examples on screen right here, two wonderful examples. Uh, and while it's technically two wonderful examples, you're looking at the same thing actually. You're looking at just the circuit board, and then that, but inside a nice plastic shell or a case. Those are the exact same device though, but that's more or less you'll find them looking exactly like that. They come in a bunch of flavors, shapes and sizes. You'll find them in all sorts of applications, but more or less when someone says Raspberry Pi, those are the two things that come to mind. They're the same thing, once just in a protective case. We'll get into that. So here we go. What'll you learn? What a Raspberry Pi is, the different versions of Raspberry Pi, the equipment needed, and the startup costs, because they do cost money, just not a lot of money. The operating system, the OS that they use, and why, uh, how to set it up, boot it up for the first time, and that process, additional operating system for specific purposes. Go into that a little bit. Logging in and poking around the operating system, that's specifically talking about the one that Raspberry Pi uses, which is Raspbian. Then add-ons and modules for different Pi projects, which a lot of people buy these things and they use them for very specific applications. Here at the library, we have Raspberry Pis that we use for specific applications. So a bunch of places do. You can find places that I know for a fact use Raspberry Pis that you won't even notice, that use them everywhere. Best Buy, Target, IKEA, uh, Walmart. Walmart uses them. Uh, a bunch of places, and these are big places. So, they're pretty cool. And why wouldn't you? They're really cheap, relative to a normal computer. So, what is a Pi? I love this description too. The Raspberry Pi is a low-cost, credit card-sized computer that plugs into a computer monitor TV, and uses a standard keyboard and mouse. It is a capable little device that enables people of all ages to explore computing and to learn how to program languages like Scratch and Python. It's capable of doing everything you'd expect a desktop computer to do, from browsing the internet and playing high definition video to making spreadsheets, word processing, and playing games. Uh, I mean, me personally, that's enough to sell me on the on the Raspberry Pi, because it's like, huh, well, why would I pay a bajillion dollars for you know uh, for like a Apple MacBook to work from home, well, it seems like I could just buy this Raspberry Pi. I'll get into that more, but yeah, they're fully functional, capable computers, and they cost like well under $100. So they're pretty great. They are pretty great. We'll go into more Pi types. Uh, a lot of information here. Raspberry Pis have been around for a while. You can see the Raspberry Pi 1 was released in 2012. They've been making new ones, popping them out up until now. This one might not even be up to date. I don't have. I believe they have a Raspberry Pi 4 B plus model now, maybe. Uh, so they might have a new one. That would be released 2020. But yeah, they've been releasing them pretty consistently since 2012. You could see they're producing more every single year. They have different models. You see Raspberry Pi Zero. I'll go into what Raspberry Pi Zero is later. I mean, I can go into it now. But like Raspberry Pi 1, these started as absolute, uh, just super basic circuit boards. All the components of any computer this has. They use very specific like proprietary like memory modules and processors that are cheap but powerful, and they'll put them together that way you the consumer gets a very low cost work for your budget in the computer, and then they don't have to pay the big guys for, oh, this has an Intel Core i7. Look, it has a Apple Retina 5K Pro XDR display, and it has oh well, you got to pay the Apple tax or the Dell tax, or oh, this is a name brand. No, this is just a, here's a machine. It does what you want it to do, and that's it. Uh, you do make some sacrifices in order to get that, which the end result is you do get a computer that costs you some of these $35, uh, but it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing because if you like Windows, or if usually when people talk about computers, usually are experienced in two different things: Windows and Mac. Well, there's a catch. Raspberry Pi has neither of those. So I'll get into that, but like that's not super bad that it has its own operating system, which is Raspbian. You could put other operating systems on it. They actually have an operating system made by Microsoft that works on the Raspberry Pi, which is a version of Windows. But it's probably not a version of Windows that you would want to use for any applications that a normal consumer would want. It's more for very specific things. I believe it's listed in these PowerPoints, but we'll go over all the Raspberry Pis again. You could see Raspberry Pi 1. Uh, these things, I mean, some of them don't have Ethernet, some of them do. Uh, these things had no Wi-Fi in the beginning. They didn't have Bluetooth. They didn't have a lot of RAM. They didn't have a lot of processing power. The idea was, all right, let's make the dirt cheapest computer and give it to people. Uh, as they got more and more popular, because people were excited, they're like, "Ooh, this is cool. That's all I really need to be able to play this game, this video game from 1997." And some people play old games, and why would you buy a brand new $900 computer to, you know, play something that's 25 years old? And you don't want to buy a 25-year-old computer to play something that's, you know, old either. So there are options. You can buy a $35 computer that can play old games and old programs relatively well. And you know what? That's good enough for some people. Why break the bank for that? Uh, but it gets better. A lot of people felt that way. A lot of people started buying it. They started getting really, really popular. And over the years, these machines started getting more and more powerful, and their costs are pretty much the same. And so for the same price of about under $50, the up to the Raspberry Pi 4, which is about under $50, $45 ish, you're getting 4 gigabytes of RAM, super fast speeds, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, stuff you would find. There's some of these Raspberry Pis are more powerful and capable than some laptops that you can find at Walmart. there are laptops that they sell at Walmart that have less than 4 gigabytes of RAM, which I would never buy, and they do cost less than other Windows laptops, but they're like $150. You should just buy a Raspberry Pi 4 at that point, unless you need Windows, in which case, and then me personally, I'd spend a couple $100 more and get a machine that's not as bad as that $150 Windows machine would be. But no, over time they've evolved, they've gotten better. Their price has gone up a little bit as they put nicer things in the Raspberry Pi. Yeah, it's going to cost more money, but they're not going to charge you $1,000 for it. They're not going to charge you $100 for it. It's going to cost under $50. Uh, but there's more to that. Here we go. Raspberry Pi versions. You get to actually physically see them, so you can see all the different ones. You'll notice the eye-catching ones right off the bat is going to be like the Raspberry Pi Zero. That's a very very cool one. I actually have a Raspberry Pi Zero at my house. They're very small, very very small. They're usually meant for very specific tasks. Me personally, my Raspberry Pi Zero is being used to filter out advertisements to my Wi-Fi and my network at home. It's like an ad blocker. It's called Pi-hole. We'll go into that in a little bit. There's a bunch of things, but some people will buy Raspberry Pi B plus motherboards. But you can see that there's like a B plus that looks like a model Raspberry Pi 3 B plus. People will buy those. They'll turn them into video game emulation systems. And so, if you ever played on like an Atari or even like newer systems like a Sega Genesis or any of those 16-bit machines, Super Nintendo, they sell programs and even full operating systems that work on these devices, on these Raspberry Pis. You could install every game, pretty much every game for these things. So you can install 300 games for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, put it onto this one $35 computer, hook it up to your computer monitor or your TV, get a controller. That would cost you like $10, and for like under $100, you're getting like a retro gaming console that have the satisfaction of making yourself. And I mean, that's awesome. That's pretty good. It'll play it better than the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo played it. It's going to play it with modern technology. That's awesome. And so usually those are the applications that people use it for. A lot of people use it for that. That's video game emulation. A lot of people use it for that. I would almost go as far as to say that's probably at least me personally, out of people that I know that have it, it's the most used application of the Raspberry Pi. If you guys ever know anybody that has a Raspberry Pi, you probably know at least one person that uses it for retro gaming emulation. But again, it's like a real computer. You could use it for browsing the internet, checking your email, normal stuff like that. They have Wi-Fi, they have Bluetooth now. They're powerful enough to open Chrome or whatever browser they use. So there you go, Raspberry Pi hardware and the starting cost. So there's a lot of components to it. Part of the reason that they're so cheap, you might see it online. Raspberry Pi, it's only $20. All right, what's the catch? Well, as you can see by the pictures, oh, these are a lot of motherboards. So what comes with it? Well, if you're just buying the Raspberry Pi, what you're looking at is what you get. You get a board, and everything's on the board. Everything that's required for the computer to run is on the board, with the exception of maybe one thing, which would be the SD card. Their storage is by a micro SD card that you'll find in like a camera or a smartphone. They use the same thing, a micro SD card. Uh, they don't come with those, and obviously you do need that to run the computer. With that one exception, everything's there. Computer's components are comprised of RAM, processor. You need the motherboard. If you're planning on connecting to the internet, you need some sort of network adapter, whether it be an Ethernet network adapter or like a Wi-Fi adapter. You want Bluetooth, you need Bluetooth. There's all sorts of components that come in to make a computer work. This one board has everything on it. It has everything on it. It's all in one. So for 20 bucks, you're getting everything. You just need a couple other things. And so that's the list of the couple other things you need. You need a power cord. You need to turn it on somehow. All right. So you need a power cord, micro SD card, what I was just talking about. Again, they're sold everywhere. You can go to Walgreens. You can go. They sell them at like Five Below. I would not buy one from Five Below. That's not particularly big either, which is in terms of size, at least the ones at Five Below. The ones that are really dirt cheap are only like 8 GB SD cards. Remember, the Raspberry Pi is a computer uh, in and of itself. If you only have, you know, 8 GB micro SD card, after maybe saving a couple files and pictures to the Raspberry Pi, it might be out of storage space. Eight, 8 GB isn't a lot. But flash storage, which is pretty much any, a flash drive, SD card, solid state drive, though that's all flash technology. Flash storage in the past couple of years has gotten really cheap. The technology behind flash storage has gotten better and better and better. And so the stuff that they've been offering keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, which is good because that means we can swoop it up for excellent prices. If you want a 128 GB flash drive, you can go out and buy them for like 12 bucks. I see them. At least maybe that's because right now it's around Christmas and this is between Black Friday and Christmas, so they might have sales. I can't guarantee you if you go and try to find one in January that they'll be at that price. But if you want to buy like SD cards or flash drives or solid state drives, now is the time to buy them before that standard changes and all the new stuff is out and all the old stuff is gone. Everyone like me will have swooped them all up, and now you're stuck with the new stuff, which is more expensive. But right now, all this flash stuff is really cheap. And so it says here it recommends 16 GB. Me personally, I'd go a little bit higher, regardless of the application that you're using it for. I personally like having 32 GB or more. The other thing is flash technology. Something that's important to remember. Flash technology is like the opposite of optical physical storage technology. If you have a really big hard drive, you might have noticed. This is starting to get a little bit technical, but like a terabyte, 1,000 gigabytes, has been pretty much the standard for a hard drive for well over a decade now. You might be asking yourself, huh, we were getting to a point where computers had a megabyte, and then, oh, now it has 25 megabytes, now it has 100 megabytes, now it has a gigabyte, that's 1,000. Now we have 100 gigabytes, 500 gigabytes, and it started to go up, and now it's kind of flatlined at 1,000. You might be asking yourself, what's the deal with that? Why have we been stuck at 1,000 gigabytes now for a while? Well, we kind of reached the limit to what hard drives are capable of doing. If you increase the size of a hard drive more and more, its speed is now starting to get slower. We're putting so much stuff onto a physical disk and having so many moving components. Hard drives that are bigger start to fail more. The ones that are designed to not fail, those hard drives are really expensive to make. They're made for like data centers for Amazon and Google. They'll pay $800 per drive. We can't afford those. The computers are supposed to cost that much money, not just the hard drives for them. So it got to a point where it's like, we'll stick to 1,000 gigabytes, thank you. And that's sort of been like the standard size for a hard drive for a while now. And so something that happens with hard drives is the higher capacity the hard drive, usually the lower performance it starts to be. Okay. So there's that. And then the other thing is that the solid state memory, flash storage, the bigger flash technology is, the faster it is. All right. And so flash technology works kind of the opposite way. The bigger the flash drive is, the faster it runs. So if you're getting an 8 GB micro SD card, it's not going to perform as well usually as like a 64 gigabyte micro SD card. So if you want a Raspberry Pi, you actually intend on using it as a real computer, sure, you could cheap out and spend $8 getting a 8 gigabyte micro SD card, or if you spend 3 times the amount of money on a 64 gigabyte one, it might perform 3 times as fast. Not only does it have more storage, it will be faster. It'll transfer files and save files and kind of act a little faster. That's kind of cool. Data cable, probably HDMI. Yeah, they pretty much all use HDMI. Pretty much every TV and every monitor in the world uses HDMI now. You need an HDMI cable. If you have an old monitor, and this is important because if you're looking to actually buy this stuff and you want a Raspberry Pi, the most important thing you're going to buy if you don't have a monitor is the monitor. If you don't have a monitor or TV, the most expensive thing you're going to be buying is the monitor or the TV. Everything else is way, way cheaper than the monitor or the TV. If you have an old monitor that doesn't have an HDMI cable, you're in luck. You can still use it. They do sell adapters that are VGA to HDMI. You can get one of those at Walmart. They're a little pricey. They are like $12, but your other options to pay like $80 to $100 for a new monitor. If you want that, then yeah. If money's not an issue and you're okay doing that, then you can buy a monitor or use your old monitor and just buy one of these adapters for $12, and bam, you could use your old monitor. Mouse. Need a mouse. Need a keyboard. It'll take USB. It pretty much only takes USB. And then case. That's funny. You'll see it says case. Optional. Okay. It might be optional. Will the computer run without a case? Yes. Please buy a case. Because your only other option is to have the exposed Raspberry Pi. And so what you see here, you'd have that exposed to the open air, the elements, your house. You spill water on that, and goodbye. You have to buy another one. You have a case, you're protecting it. So if I go all the way back to, yeah, so that the one on the left is what you're going to buy. That case you can get relatively cheap. If you have a 3D printer, you could actually print a case for it. You probably want a case, a protective case to house your Raspberry Pi in. Me personally, I would go out of my way to buy one. You can literally buy them from I've seen them at a Walmart. They are not at every Walmart. You'd be hard pressed to find it at Walmart. Places you'll absolutely for certain find them: Micro Center, Fry's Electronics, Best Buy. They will sell cases for Raspberry Pi. You can go to a physical store and buy them. Otherwise, Amazon, online, any online retailer, you could just look up Raspberry Pi case. Just make sure that the Raspberry Pi case you're getting is one for your specific version of Raspberry Pi. You can see they come in different shapes and sizes. You obviously want the one that works for the Raspberry Pi that you bought. Because if you buy one for the B plus and you have the 0, that's obviously not going to fit. Especially if you have the 0 case and you have the B plus. That's it's too big. So make sure you're getting the right one. Here we have some costs. You can see the Raspberry Pi 3 model B plus with Wi-Fi. It's under $40. It's $35 for a computer. Raspberry Pi 4, much newer, has Bluetooth, is much more RAM. $45. That's pretty good. That'll do pretty much anything that a PC that a normal person would want to do. Spread both of those spreadsheets, word processing. If you're using like Word, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, stuff like that. It'll work with. One thing is Windows applications themselves won't work with the operating system. There is a workaround, and we'll get to that. We'll look at more of these prices. Everything else, relatively low cost. You do need a power adapter, something to plug into, for power, $4. Here we have a case for the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, $6 for the case. It's not that much money. Micro SD card, Samsung micro SD card. This is a Samsung Evo. That's like high-end micro SD card, $10. And you're getting 64 gigabytes. Hey, That's pretty good. I was saying get more than 8. 64 is much much more than 8. All right, 16 or more. I prefer 32 or more. 32 or more is kind of overkill. This is double that, and it's $10. Why wouldn't you get that? Mouse and keyboard. Mouse and keyboard's the most expensive thing on the list, other than the monitor. It's only $15, and you're getting a mouse and keyboard. And if you already have somewhere in your house a USB mouse or keyboard, bam, that's free. If you have a wall charger, it uses micro USB. So if you have an Android smartphone that was made a little bit ago, now we switched to USB-C. But most Android devices in the past use micro USB. If you have a Kindle, that's micro USB. I wish I had an example of micro USB around me, but I don't. But it just uses a normal micro USB. It does draw more power than a standard micro USB cable would have. But if you have a power brick that's at least 5 volts, 2 amps, which is the standard Apple power brick that you'll use to charge an Apple device, the ones that you plug into the wall with the USB. If you have that and a micro USB cable, that's sufficient for the Raspberry Pi. You get one of those. The ones that are specifically made for the Pi are a little bit more sophisticated. There is one small problem that I'm neglecting to mention, which is that we go back to these boards. Well, what's missing here? Well, on some of them don't, but some of them do, some of them don't. Some of these don't have power buttons. Kind of interesting. What's the deal with that? Well, if it has power, it'll turn itself on, and if it doesn't have power, it'll turn itself off. Yeah, they're pretty primitive, but it saves money, a lot of money. So some of these do have power buttons on the physical device, but the ones that don't, some of the power cables that come specifically made for the Raspberry Pi, they'll have power buttons on them, on and off switches. If you're going to use your personal USB cable, it's not going to have a power button. So just keep in mind that the thing's going to be running. You can put the Raspberry Pi to sleep. You should do that. Something to think about. The monitor. It says $89. You can get a monitor cheaper. Not going to be as good as the $89 one. There are monitors that are better than the $89 one, so that's something to think about. So there's other things. We have a Raspberry Pi kit. We have all the things listed here, every single thing. We got the Raspberry Pi module. We have the wall charger. We have the case. We have the SD card. We have mouse and keyboard. Here's a kit. You'll notice under the kit it says does not include mouse, keyboard, monitor, HDMI cable. Sure, but how much more money is the kit? Well, it's like $10 more, and you're getting the case and usually the power adapter. And as you can see, the case and the power adapter is like $10. So it's kind of just bundling everything for you. Me personally, I don't get the kits only because I like to choose what my case looks like. Are you saving any money with the case? No, but you're not losing any money either. Now, it says most kits don't include mouse, keyboard, monitor, HDMI cable. It's kind of 50-50. Some kits will also include the micro SD card. If they include the micro SD card and the case and the power adapter, you actually save money with the kit. In which case, buy the kit. You get everything. The only thing that you're missing is the HDMI cable and the mouse and the keyboard. You probably have those lying around in your house. So get a mouse and keyboard, get a monitor. If it's an old monitor, buy one of those adapters I was talking about. Usually, if you have an older monitor, it's usually using one of two things, VGA or DVI. All right? You need to go online or to Walmart and find a VGA to HDMI or a DVI to HDMI. You buy it for 10 to 12 bucks. Bam. And then you can use your old monitor. Awesome. Then you got monitor, mouse, keyboard, and the kit has everything else. That's pretty awesome. What operating system? So there's a bunch of different operating systems. These are all different versions of Raspbian. Most people use Noobs. That's the base level Raspbian operating system that people use. Uh, right out of the box, Noob's best option. Yeah, so Noob's is it's like I don't know. It's kind of like Windows. It's kind of like a cross between Windows and Linux. Technically, it is Linux based. It'll have a taskbar at the top. I'm sure I have a picture of it later, but it's got a taskbar at the top and a desktop and then a bunch of programs, like most computers do. So yeah, but Raspbian's the official operating system of the Pi. It's free, doesn't cost any money. There's no licensing costs. You don't have to pay for a license or activate it. It's not like Windows, and it's actually pretty easy to use. It's pretty user friendly. You won't get it and be like, oh no, I don't know what to do. The one thing that I will mention is that a lot of more advanced, if you're kind of into computers, most of the more advanced things that you could do with the Raspberry Pi, those are things that are only accessible by command line. So if you're into command line, like DOS level stuff, you need to know command line pretty well to be able to configure a Raspberry Pi. Because if you don't know command line, you're really limited to what options you have. Like with Windows, you have command prompt, which is a command line. If you don't want to use the command line on Microsoft Windows, that's fine. You have control panel. And through control panel, you can do pretty much everything in Windows. Raspbian has a control panel, but it's very limited what you can do. Connect to the internet, mess with like brightness, a couple other settings, privacy settings, locking the device with like a password. Sorry, but south of that, it doesn't really give you as much freedom as like the Windows control panel. If you want to totally customize your device with all sorts of super technical stuff, you're going to need to use the command line. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind. If you just want the device to have a cheap computer to browse the web, watch YouTube or play retro video games, you don't have to worry about that at all. But we have other operating systems. So I see RetroPie. RetroPie is literally an operating system just for gaming. So it's basically a emulation operating system. You can onload and offload ROMs for gaming onto RetroPie. You could play video games. You could play Sonic the Hedgehog, old school video games. That's awesome. Windows 10 IoT. It's Internet of Things. For specific purposes. It even says stay away, and I actually didn't notice. Yeah. So Windows 10 IoT. You might see, oh, it says Windows 10. I should get that because I know what Windows 10 is. No, it is literally only made for specific purposes. What purposes would that be? I don't know. It's for you to decide. Usually it's for like making a specific technical device perform a task from a user-defined setting. So like, well, what's an example I can give you? If you're not familiar with the Internet of Things, it's basically using a network connection, the internet, to do stuff. Microsoft, for some reason, designed an operating system specifically based around that. There are some pretty cool Internet of Things stuff, applications that people have made. They're able to make like, I don't know, people have made like home security systems out of Internet of Things stuff. That's cool. They'll do home automation, smart home stuff. For example, a program to turn on the lights or to like check what time it is. Windows 10 IoT is the operating system to make that stuff function. And that's it. It's not designed for you to browse the internet. It's not designed for you to work on PowerPoint. It's designed to, okay, I'm going to check and make sure the camera is doing this. Cool, the camera is doing that. Well, I'll make sure the camera does that in 1 hour, and that's all it does. So it's very basic, and it's made for very specific purposes. I'd stay away from that. If you like Internet of Things, I would definitely check that out. There is another ARM-based. ARM is the processor that the Raspberry Pi uses. There's another Windows operating system that I believe works on Raspberry Pi. I would stay away from that as well because it's very iffy. The one that you probably want is Noobs, Raspbian. That's if you want retro gaming, RetroPie. Those are the main ones people are going to run. You got Jesse. It's a full operating system, feels like modified Windows operating system. That's pretty good too. All of them are pretty good, except the last one. So, you know, setting up for first boot. So the kit might include a bootable SD card, like I said. So some kits include it. I say it's about 50-50. If you go onto like Amazon for a Raspberry Pi, check the information for the Raspberry Pi, read the description, see what it comes with. The other thing is most of the kits on like Amazon, they'll have a big screen or like a big picture. It'll give you a big, overview of the stuff that it comes with. Look at that, read the description, see if it comes with an SD card. If it doesn't come with an SD card, you need to buy one. Otherwise, you're not able to use your Raspberry Pi. So, but most of them come with an SD card. And once you have everything, you need to use the SD card immediately, which is another part that a lot of people, this is usually the issue most people run into. You need to install the operating system, Raspbian, RetroPie, whatever you want to use. Most people, it's going to be Raspbian, which is the official Raspberry Pi operating system. You need to put Raspbian on the SD card. How do I do that? Well, you need to go on like another computer. I know, kind of redundant, but so you gotta use your any other computer. If you don't have a computer, you can go to a library. Public libraries have at least Orland Park Library has public use computers, and you need a micro USB adapter. Most micro SD cards come with SD card, full size SD card adapters. So you can plug the micro SD card into the SD card. And then if you have an SD card reader, most people have a laptop with an SD card reader. You can plug the SD card adapter with the micro SD card in it into the laptop. That way you can read and write information to the SD card, the micro SD card, from your laptop. And you'll need to put Raspbian. We have raspberrypi.org/download. So you'll need to put Raspbian from there onto the micro SD card. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube showing how to do it. If you will go on YouTube and look up how to put Raspbian on a micro SD card, they'll go into more technical details on how to do that, but more or less that's what you have to do. There is an alternative in terms of the adapters and moving it, because either way you need the micro SD card. If either your micro SD card doesn't come with an SD adapter, or you don't have an SD card reader or a micro SD card reader, what most people have is USB ports, to put like a thumb drive. They sell on like Amazon small, like they look like flash drives that are just micro SD card readers. And you just take the micro SD card and put it into like this flash drive looking thing, and you just plug it into your computer like a flash drive. And then you just install Raspbian on it that way. Some flash drives, you should look. If anyone is actually interested in getting a Raspberry Pi and they are going to buy their own components like the SD card, you can save money. You don't have to buy the SD card and buy one of these adapters. They have SD cards that are bundled with those. I think SanDisk, Samsung, like actual name brand memory places, they actually do have, they'll sell you a micro SD card with the little flash drive adapter thing that I'm talking about. But what you're looking for is a micro SD card, micro SD to USB adapter. That's what I'm talking about. They're very small. They're very cool. So that's what I would use because it's easy, and also because I actually don't have anything in my house that reads SD cards. Probably throughout an SD card reader a while ago because I realized I don't really have SD cards. I have micro SD cards, but I think I had a micro SD card and I was trying to put Raspbian on a Raspberry Pi and I realized, I I don't have any way to put Raspbian on this. And so I went on Amazon, and I found this thing. It's like a flash drive, and I put the micro SD card in the flash drive looking thing, and I put it into my computer. Bam, I was done. So that's what you want to do. Once you put the operating system on it, there is a micro SD card slot on the actual on these Raspberry Pis themselves. Uh, I know it's hard to see. I wish I had a bigger picture, but one of those is actually like a little slot for the micro SD card. Once Raspbian's on it, it just goes right into the circuit board, into the Raspberry Pi, and then bam, it'll boot up once it has power. Uh, but yeah, here we go. Additional operating system softwares for specific purposes. We got Chromium Kiosk Mode. Well, what's that? Well, if you're running like a, I don't know, store or something, it's designed for people that go up and use the computer to look for stuff, like a kiosk. Weather Station, Oracle Pi Weather Station software, tell you stuff about the weather. Gaming Machine, RetroPie, we were talking about that. That's its own separate thing. You could emulate games, play retro style video games from like the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo. IP camera DVR. If you have a computer, or maybe you have a business and you have security cameras and you need a computer just for looking at the cameras, this will do that. Why break the bank for a fancy computer when its only job is to look at cameras and manage cameras? You can let a Raspberry Pi do that. It's more than capable of doing that. Ad blocker, Pi-hole. Okay, I didn't actually know that was in the list. So that's what I have, and I use a Pi Zero for that. And so Pi Zero is the tiny one. It also costs the least amount of money. It was like $12 or something. And so I have that attached to essentially my router, and it just blocks all incoming advertisements. So that's awesome. And programming Python. And I think it mentioned Scratch as well. Scratch is a very kid friendly, like beginning level programming language. It's meant to introduce people into the world of programming and coding. So Scratch I'm familiar with, and then Python most people are familiar with, or they've at least heard of Python by now. Python's really, really, really popular. I know they teach Python in junior high schools, and pretty much every single college in the entire world. That's really popular. But like, that's another thing that you might want to think about when you get a Raspberry Pi, is they're great for that, programming and stuff. Logging in and poking around. So we have a picture right here. What is that? That's Raspbian. So you get to see that's a nice looking desktop wallpaper of like a road. And you can see in the top left you have like your start button. It's kind of like, you know, if you're familiar with like a Windows computer, it's the taskbar that you'll see on the bottom. It's on the top. And yes, you can move it to the bottom if that, in your mind, you're not used to that. And you're like, oh, this is weird. Why is everything at the top? You can move it from the top to the bottom, but I believe initially it just starts at the top. That's just how it is. And you can see this has like a bunch of pre-installed programming options. You can see Scratch, you can see Python, a bunch of other things. Office, education, internet. It has a web browser, so you can go to like Google. You can connect to your Wi-Fi at home, and then you can go to Google.com. You can go to Gmail, or Yahoo's email, or wherever you have your email from. You could use it to check your email like any other web browser. Games, I believe they have pre-installed games. I'm not sure what they are, but you can certainly use the Raspberry Pi to find more games and add games to your Raspberry Pi from the internet. You can't play super modern games, like you're not going to play, well, you're not going to play Call of Duty on it. I was going to say you're not going to play Minecraft on it, but that's a lie. Microsoft, who owns Minecraft, actually does make a version of Minecraft specifically for the Raspberry Pi. I believe it's called Minecraft Pi. I believe it's free. I know for a fact it is not the same as any other version of Minecraft. It's pretty bare bones as to the content in the game, but it is Minecraft for the Raspberry Pi, and it does exist. It runs, so that counts for something. Accessories, that's like a bunch of, it'll be stuff like clock, weather, other applications that are thrown into the Raspberry Pi itself. But that's more or less what it looks like. And you can see you got like your web browser, your file explorer, and then your console for command line, so you can type commands. Something I do have to mention that I mentioned I was going to talk about later was I mentioned, oh, you can use Microsoft Office. And then I also proceeded to mention that Windows applications won't run on Raspberry Pi. Yeah, so you can't just go to Microsoft's website and then install Microsoft Office that you might be paying for. So for if you own Microsoft 365 and you're like, oh, this is great, I'll install Office 2019 on my Raspberry Pi. No, you can't do that. Officially, Office only runs on Mac and Windows, but I mentioned there's a web browser, and where there's a web browser, there's the free version of Office that's always available for Microsoft's website offered by 365. The web version of Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel, you can run those. And even if you don't want to run those or you don't care about running the web version, there's alternatives. There's LibreOffice. That's it's a version. It's an Office suite that people have used on Linux for forever. Some people have it on Windows, and it's like the exact same thing: PowerPoint, Excel, Word, and you could use that. That I believe also comes pre-installed on Raspbian. If you went to Office on that tab there, I believe that's what it would show up with. If not, you can definitely download those. That works perfectly fine. They're able to open, edit, write, create Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint files. So if you're working from home or if you're, a student and you actually want to use this to do something productive, like, you know, write something for an exam, or like you know a, some sort of paper that you got to write for school or for work, you can do that with versions of Office that do work with Raspbian. So that's pretty cool. Add-ons and modules for different Pi projects. Got a lot to take in here. Camera module, Sense Hat, Unicorn Hat, Moto Zero, Traffic Hat, Analog Zero. Got a bunch of things. The ones that come out to me that I noticed, Unicorn Hat. I believe that's the one that's super. It's got the like blinky looking thing on it. It's the like LED, the one with a bunch of lights on it. I know there's one with the three lights. The one that's Traffic Hat is the one that's got the green, yellow, and red, kind of like a traffic light. That's what that one is. But the one that's to the most leftmost, that's Unicorn Hat. That's made primarily. I see it for like people either like mount them to a wall or like a door, and they can make it. They can modify the pixels to have like a sweeping message that says like hello. Businesses will use them to say, we're open, or sorry, we're closed. They can have text that scrolls and says that. If you get enough of those modules together, you can have a longer thing of text, and you can make it say like, you know, the weather, time and date, stuff like that. Some people just use them to have fancy rainbows and all sorts of funny lighting effects. Some people just use them for that. And that's cool too. All these things are we think that's the analog zero. They're all for very specific purposes, but they're all things that you can add onto a Raspberry Pi. Something I mentioned that Raspberry Pis, you can find them in like Walmart and Best Buy. So Walmart will use them for like, if you ever go to Walmart and you go to at least for every Walmart that's near here, if you go to the very back where they sell the electronics, and you go and you find the Nintendo section with the Nintendo Switches and the Nintendo DSs and all the Mario games and stuff like that, they'll usually sell the Switches in their case, locked up in like a box, and they'll have a thing like a giant poster that says Nintendo Switch on it, and they'll have like a little screen with speakers that shows a little presentation of what the Nintendo Switch is. They might have a big TV that's playing a Switch game, but usually they'll have like a tiny little touch screen that you can poke around, and it'll show you all sorts of different things that the Nintendo Switch can do. You know, maybe you're like, oh, what's the Nintendo Switch, or how much does it cost, or where can I find it? Little touchscreen, little panel. And you might find that with a bunch of things. You can go to Home Depot, and there might be a little information thing with a little touchscreen that's about this big. And it'll give you information about, I don't know, lights or something at Home Depot. The little tiny touchscreen, 90% of the time, is a Raspberry Pi. And the touchscreen is an actual module that Raspberry Pi sells. It's an official touchscreen device. And it's specifically meant for like retail kiosks. And another place that I know that has that is IKEA. And so it'll have like, I don't know, usually the name of the thing they're selling and what it is. And then you can use the touchscreen to like see related items at the store, or whatever that the retailer wants to have the information that shows up on the touchscreen. That's cool. Those are Raspberry Pi. Part of the reason I know they're Raspberry Pi is because one of them at Walmart was glitching out. And instead of showing me that it was Nintendo Switch, instead it was the desktop for Raspbian. So, whoops, somebody messed up. But yeah, no, those run on Raspberry Pis, and why wouldn't they? Because there's a lot of WalMarts in the country, and if the little touchscreen for the Nintendo section was an actual computer for all 10,000 Walmart stores or whatever, that would cost a lot of money. But since they're Raspberry Pis, who cares? It doesn't cost that much money, and the corporation saves a bunch of money switching to Raspberry Pis for them to do a specific task. So it says thank you. I'm sure people have a lot of questions. It's a lot to go over. So yeah, I'm trying to think of other uses of the Raspberry Pi. If you have any questions, you should be able to send questions. I can answer them right now live while I think of other applications of the Raspberry Pi. I know Best Buy for a fact uses Raspberry Pis. One other thing that I know I've seen with the Raspberry Pi is like Nest. I think it's called Nest. Google owns it. They have like all sorts of like smart home stuff, security cameras, Nest cameras, speakers, stuff like baby monitors, that kind of stuff. They'll have all the packages of all things you could buy at Best Buy, and they'll have like a little computer monitor with a little another like little touchscreen device, and they'll have a video explaining what Nest is, and they're like, oh, Nest is a security blah blah blah. That little video on the little screen, that's a Raspberry Pi that's just playing a video over and over again, trying to get you to buy their product. And so if you're a retailer or a store, you might use a Raspberry Pi to just play a video. Some people have Raspberry Pis to just show a slideshow. If you have if you're another place is airports typically try to stay away from Raspberry Pis for giving information on flights, mostly because they need to be very accurate, nonstop, 24/7. They actually use larger systems, so most airports don't use it for that. But airports will use Raspberry Pis for advertising. Advertisers will pay to have their, advertisement on like a giant TV in the hallways of airports. And rather than have computers manage the advertisements, they'll put them on Raspberry Pis. And so the giant TV that's displaying all sorts of advertisements, that'll be off of a Raspberry Pi. So that's pretty cool. Let's see, any questions? Don't have any questions yet. So other applications. Well, really that's about it. I usually see them from used by retailers to display information, advertising. Usually they're advertising a product and then explaining what it is. Other than that, again, most of the time that when I think of a Raspberry Pi, people are using it for emulation. People are using it to play video games. And if they're not using it to play video games, they use it as a home computer to do very basic stuff. Microsoft Office doesn't work unless you're using the web version of it on a web browser. You can use a version of Chrome. There's Chromium, which works on the Raspberry Pi. You can use that. You can go to Microsoft's website and you can access Word that way. Otherwise, you could use LibreOffice, the Office suite. I know that has its own PowerPoint equivalent and its own Excel equivalent, and you can mess with spreadsheets or mess with slides, uh, or it gives you the capability to use Office programs, browse the internet, watch videos on the internet, and you know check your email. And those like four things is for the most part all most people really ever do on the computer. And so these small little $35 devices will do all of that and more. That's pretty hard to beat. That's a hard one to beat. So they're really popular and they're only getting better. And their prices are getting more expensive by like $10. So you want the cheap one? It's $35, or you could get the really nice one for $45. That's pretty nice. I get the $45 one. You could have Bluetooth. The cool thing with Bluetooth is we were talking about. If I go back, we were talking about RetroPie. So RetroPie, you can attach Bluetooth controllers. And so with RetroPie, yeah, you can have like wired controllers and play your, Sega game with a wired controller. But with the Raspberry Pi 4, those things have Bluetooth. And so if you go out and buy a Bluetooth controller, you get to enjoy Super Mario or, Sonic the Hedgehog with a wireless controller. That's awesome, man. And the controllers cost like the same amount of money. Whether at least from my reference is Fry's Electronics, the cost of a wired retro controller and a wireless one, they're like exactly the same. And so you pay $10 more for the better Raspberry Pi, and you can enjoy a nice, wireless, more luxurious version of gaming that existed in like the 80s and 90s. So that's pretty cool. And so more or less, that's what people use the Raspberry Pi for. Uh, anyone else has any questions, they can contact me. I know it doesn't say my email address on here. Sorry about that, but my email address is just mmontalvo@orlandparklibrary.org. Uh, otherwise, you can just feel free to call the Information Technology Department at the Orland Park Public Library. See our extension there, 708-428-5171. And yeah, again, Matt Montalvo. And so usually this is also the part where I would mention other computer classes, but those will be coming in about a month. Well, we have more classes coming up. I'm sorry I don't have them for you here right now. If you want any more information, of course, you could either call the library at any time, or you can go to our website at orlandparklibrary.org. So thank you very much, and I hope you guys enjoy.